Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Alex, for the introductions. My name is Amma Afrifa-Chi. I am Head of Culture and Wellbeing at Mental Health First Aid England. Thank you for those who are joining us for the second time for our second conversation. Those that are new to our conversation, welcome. We hope that this will continue to be a series of conversations that we will be having. But without further ado, I would like to introduce the panel. But before I do, sorry, I'm just looking at the slides like, what's going on? Okay, now, so in this webinar, what we will be discussing is we'll be recap, our honest discussion around race and race equity in the workplace, which is also vital for thriving organizations. And Mental Health First Aid England are committed to being an anti-racist organization. We will also explore why racism or discussing racism at work and its effect on mental health proves to be difficult. We'll also look at some example questions on how to navigate the conversations about race and mental health. So joining me again today are my lovely panelists, Chloe and Ada. And I will leave them to introduce themselves because I always feel that sometimes there's never enough justice done when you introduce on behalf of others. So Ada, if I can start with you, please. Please do introduce yourself.
Thank you, Amma. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ada Paris. I am the new chair of Mental Health First Aid. Firstly, I'd like to thank Amma, Chloe, Alex, Simon, and Sophie and the whole team at Mental Health First Aid for doing this initiative, because it's not just a flash in the pan. This is something as an ongoing initiative that we will be undertaking. So I want to thank everybody for that opportunity. As I said, I'm the chair of Mental Health First Aid. But outside in the day job, I'm a technology futurist, an activist and an artist. And so at the center of everything I do is about human potential. So I'm looking forward to taking part in this second conversation with you all.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be back with my lovely panelists, and huge thank you to all the team at MHFA, not only for this initiative, but the work that they're doing, and I'm really pleased to be a part of it. In my day job, I'm head of PR and partnerships at my work. I facilitate our internal and external conversations. Outside of that, I volunteer for UK Black Pride and the London Queer Fashion Show. So I'm a workplace advocate. I'm a bi-mum of 2, and I class myself as a mental health survivor. So really important that we're having these conversations. It's round 2. So yeah, I'm excited. Please don't expect us to behave.
We actually had a catch up before this session, and we were actually talking about, just how to have the woosah moments in between. So I'm excited about this conversation. I really loved our first conversation and just the topics that we discussed, and we got so many questions from that. And I'm sure we will have a lot more questions for today's session too. So, again, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A session, and we will kick off. I would like to start actually with a poll. Just to check and sense check who's new and who isn't. Have you joined one of our previous webinars on race and mental health in the workplace? We had our first one on the 22nd of September, which was around supporting the mental health of people of color and Black colleagues. And we had our second one on the 1st of October, which was around becoming an anti-racist organization. So the poll choices should be coming up shortly. If you could please choose, just so we can get a sense check of who's in our virtual room today. A couple more seconds, and Alex, if you could share the results, that would be brilliant. Okay, thank you for sharing the results. Oh, so it's great. We've got an actual huge amount of you that haven't attended any, which is great in the sense of that some of these conversations we'll be having will be new for you. But for those that haven't attended either sessions, we actually do have the recordings up on our website, Mental Health First Aid England website, for you to go and watch them. So I really encourage you to do that. It's good to see that we've actually got a split between both and somewhat viewing one or the other. So that's great. But more importantly, question 2 was about how you would feel about having conversations about race and mental health in the workplace. And we have actually an interesting mix. We've got about 24% of you that said they would feel comfortable and confident. We've got about 38% of you that said, I would talk about it, but I might feel it might make people feel uncomfortable. And then we've got the next biggest majority, around 34% of you saying that I would like to, but I'm worried that I would say the wrong thing or upset people. So I think for those that are in the 30%, 34% and 38 bracket for the other two, hopefully by the end of this webinar and our conversations will enable you to think about how you approach it in your workplace and how to actually start having the right conversations and navigate that. So let's crack on with what we're here to do today. So our first question is, why is racism and its effect on mental health so difficult to discuss in the workplace? Ada, we'll go to you first. What do you think about that?
Okay, we're going straight in, feet first,
We're
right?
going straight in.
Straight in. I think there's no one reason. There's no one reason, and I think it depends on your perspective of where you're coming from, your own lived experience of that, as to why it's difficult and what that means. Because so, as a Black woman, and that's how I identify as a Black woman, being in many workplaces, being the one of a minority or one of the few people in the workplace, it's not necessarily having other people who understand your experiences, the nuances of your experiences. So racism doesn't have to be a big out and out somebody who's, you know, verbally attacked you or done something in that way. A lot of time what happens in the work environment is that it's microaggressions or micro invalidations, and those are the things that are more subtle but in many ways more insidious, and so they creep in. And so what that happens is that you end up doubting yourself and having those questions of, well, will people really believe me, or do they think that I'm making this up, or do they think that I'm blowing this up and exaggerating this? So there's that side. On the other side of that, what I believe happens is that it's really uncomfortable for people, and I think that a lot of people recognize that something's wrong or that shouldn't happen, or, you know, there's sometimes, you know, as humans, sometimes what we do is we respond by a nervous laugh, with a nervous laugh. There's that uncomfortability of people going, oh, it feels really uncomfortable, but I don't know what to say. And I don't know how to approach it, because maybe I don't have the language. Maybe I don't want to be seen in this almost savior complex. Maybe it's something that I don't want to put my head above water and be pointed out as somebody who has recognized that this is an issue. And so it's a really complex situation as a starting point. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be addressed. If anything, that is why it should be addressed, because it means that we need to really start to recognize that it's going to be uncomfortable. Change is always uncomfortable, and we need to lean into that. But I'm going to stop there because I know I've talked. But Chloe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think also the impact, you know, for a lot of times, and we talked about this in the first session, for a lot of times throughout all of our careers, we have either been the only, or, you know, we've been the example of what a Black woman in business in our particular fields has been. So if you're experiencing that in real time as yourself, to then have to discuss it and discuss what's happening to you and try and be the instigator of change for something that is happening for you, is not only traumatic, but actually is quite exhausting, quite tiring. You know, if you're trying to do, you know, work as I am sometimes in workplace advocacy, and so you're speaking on behalf of others and taking that lived experience, that also gets difficult, not because I'm not afraid to have the uncomfortable conversations, but when you are constantly having uncomfortable conversations, that also plays a bit of a toll on you know, on an individual's mental health. I know that it does on mine. So I think it's, you know, we could go in so many different places with this. and I think it keeps coming back to the heart of that these conversations are incredibly important, and it is not the responsibility of the more marginalized of us to keep being the instigators of these conversations, because then if it's being utilized into the mainstream, we can share our experience and do that safely, but it's not our responsibility to put that experience into real time in a business in the first place. So
yeah. I just want to add something to that. Is I think that maybe, especially given that a lot of this audience is the first time coming to this, that I think that the other thing that people need to recognize, and maybe something we can talk about, is that maybe people don't always recognize what the impact of racism is on mental health and well-being of people of color and, you know, Black people in the work environment. So, you know, and I think that that's something that we could talk about. I mean, Emma, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think it's an interesting one, because I think for me, I definitely agree. Is when you have to, I was thinking in my head actually when you were talking, both of you were, I remember I was doing some work around disability, and we talked about having like a disability passport. So the reason why we're talking about disability passport was, what we found was that when people had new line managers, the fact that they had to keep restating their disability, especially if it was an invisible disability, the fact that they had to keep restating it had such an impact on their mental health and well-being. So having this disability passport, in essence, enabled the line managers to understand what's happening, to save the individual from having to retell their story time and time again and have to go through the process. Now, I'm not saying it's anywhere near comparative, but it's very similar. The fact that you have to keep retelling your story, and the fact that you're always fearful of, okay, do I need to filter it, temper it? How are people going to react when I say this? How are people going to actually see me when I say this? Am I going to be brushed off? Will actually someone just acknowledge that I'm experiencing this or I've gone through this? It's hard hitting every time. So, and when it's the subtleties, and it's usually the subtle pieces that are much more difficult to actually discuss, because it is that thing around, it's my emotion. So it's my emotion and my feeling versus someone saying, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or it wasn't meant to be that way, or how do I support you in going forward? And the key thing I think around this is around just acknowledgement of the fact that yes, it does impact in you know, people in mental health in a way that, you know, is exhausting. And when you have to keep having to say something, and you just have to find the energy to keep saying it, and then again and again, it just gets too much. But I do agree, these conversations need to be had in the workplace, but we also need to get to a place where the conversations start to change. So, you know, it's not I understand that people might find difficulties in how to approach the conversation, but the first point comes around when somebody says something, or how they've experienced it. You acknowledge it and then say, okay, well, what do I need? What do you need me to do to support you sometimes? Or actually, this is what I can do to support. And we can talk about this forever, because some of the stuff that, you know, you mentioned, Chloe, around speaking on behalf of others. Again, when we talk about allyship, this is an interesting thing, because this is where I think allyship also can go wrong, because suddenly people feel that they have to speak on behalf, and that is not what allyship is about. Allyship is talking for and with the people, not over and behalf. And in order to be a good ally, you have to listen and acknowledge. And in order to be a good ally, you have to check in and find out how people are doing. And so for me, I think there is definitely something around having that further conversation around how to, but then maneuvering the conversation to just, first of all, acknowledging if somebody says something, or they've had an experience, or if someone has actually witnessed something, the question becomes, okay, what do we do to address the situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things there. So it's as humans, we all want to be seen and heard. And I think, and that's the starting point in recognizing that people of color and Black people in the work environment, also because we may be a part of a bigger marginalized community, we want to be seen and heard. And so if you're then talking about allyship, one of the big things about being an ally is not making it about yourself. So not making yourself central to the reason why you're stepping in, because I feel that this is wrong, and I feel that this, because it makes it all about you. What you're there to do, you know, is about being actively anti-racist and taking that chance, leaning in and stepping and saying, how can I support you? ask rather than tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I said it in the last session, people have to listen to hear and don't listen to respond. And it's like Amma said, these are uncomfortable conversations. These are uncomfortable situations. None of us want to be experiencing this, but actually listening to our stories, listening to our lived experience and what is happening, and not actually questioning whether that has happened, or I don't think that person really meant that. So I'll give you two perfect examples of regular microaggressions that happen to me on at least a weekly basis. Chloe, you speak so well, and I don't see colour. Well, this doesn't wash off.
Yeah.
And I speak the way I speak because I had a good education. Is that any different because I'm Black? And so when you're constantly faced with things like that, and then you have to do the unlearning for people who maybe may not realize that what they're saying is wrong, or also there are those people that do and do it intentionally. When we're talking about how this then all has an effect, is that when it's happening to you in real time, plus also you're trying to educate in real time, all of this has an impact and it has an effect. So it's really thinking about, I mean, allyship could take me half a day, you know how I feel about allyship, but you know, it's really thinking about what can you actually do. The starting place is that you really have to listen and bite your tongue through the uncomfortable, because what someone is telling you is valid. What they're sharing is, you know, it is really difficult at the best of times. Is how you then take that knowledge and use what you have to try and stop it from happening in your workplace or in, you know, your life, and how that impacts other people. But the first starting has to be that you are listening to those experiences, you understand that it is wrong, and then you're then part of the change that is helping to change that from happening again.
100%, Chloe. And I think there's, you and Ada, you mentioned as well about language, that, you know, when people's good intentions are, I don't see color, well, what they actually mean is actually the color of your skin does not make a difference.
Yeah.
That is different than saying I don't see color, because like you say, this doesn't wash off. And that's the first thing you obviously see, aside from obviously being a Black woman or whatever, but that's the first thing that you obviously see. So to disacknowledge it actually doesn't do justice. You know, and I think it's really important that we also know that just everybody's experience is different. So just because something might impact a person of color and might not necessarily impact another person of color, Black person, to that level or degree, doesn't make it not valid. And that's the thing that I really want to bring home here as well, is that everybody has an individual experience. We can all share in those experiences because in some dimension or degree, we might have lived it or been through it in a way. But the level of how it impacted me, for example, might be very different to you, Ada, or you, Chloe. So when people are, again, sharing their stories, you shouldn't automatically think, okay, cool, well, that's everybody else, or, you know, oh, just because this person didn't feel that way, or because someone else shared it with me, but they didn't have that impact, doesn't not validate that. So I think you have to treat people as individuals and also as their experiences as individuals. And I was actually having a really good conversation yesterday with a psychologist, and he was talking more about the emotion perspective of mental health and well-being, because emotion is subjective. And what we need to do is remove the subjective judgment from what we are seeing in our conversations around racism, and purely understand that it is we have to take that step back. Similar to when we teach our mental health first aid training, is that, you know, you don't impose your situations on people for understanding. You have to understand through their lens. So it's really important, I think, you know, and once you know, you understand that better in the workplace, you know, it becomes less and less to have these difficult discussions. It's just being open, and also we'll understand that, you know, it's really interesting, because I think, you know, I might be saying something a little bit controversial here, but also what I find really interesting is that whenever we're talking about racism or have talked about racism, we always have to consider it of how it's going to land for our white colleagues. We never think about, well, actually, the bravery that we actually, you know, people of color, Black people, have to take to even have that conversation. And the numerous amount of filters and thinking and having to check with our, you know, our support systems, or should I say this? If I say this, is it going to go? Like, we don't just say it immediately.
Yeah.
It's taken us time to actually say it. So what I actually would really like to encourage is, I understand that our white colleagues might be fearful of how to approach the subject, but that's part of the learning, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's very much around understanding that we shouldn't have to think about how we temper or package it, because sometimes these conversations are going to get real, they're going to be raw, and we're going to have to live with that. Yeah. So we could talk about this question forever, but also we don't have enough time. So let's go on to our next question. So I feel my organization isn't doing enough to discuss racism, but I'm reluctant to discuss it and worried I will be ignored or accused of troublemaking. How can I raise the issue without feeling like I'm being accusatory? Which is good for some of the stuff we talked about actually in the previous question. So Chloe, would you like to kick us off at this one?
I have to like pull out, so someone put in the Q&A, you know, how do we get to a point where, you know, you feel comfortable? And it's by doing things like this, you know, like we said, it's if you see it and you recognize it, understand that yes, there may be that point of, like Amma just said, you know, where you're thinking and feeling about the, you know, will I be ignored or will I be accused? But you have to understand that to the people that this is happening to, we've already gone through this battle ourselves in actually being able to voice it. So your responsibility, if you see it happening, is to, of course, address it in whichever way you possibly can. Now, most organizations will have a hierarchy in place that you can do that, whether it be through whistleblowing, through HR practices and principles. You know, that I always say to people that you should try and do it as safely as possible, but right and wrong is right and wrong. And if you see someone being abused in the workplace, someone facing racism, then you should use your voice, because if it happens to you, I would hope that in a similar situation, someone else can stand up and show up for you in the same. So it's not this, well, it's not happening to me, so, you know, I'm just going to kind of duck out. That's not right. That's not inclusive. It's if you see something is wrong, then actually you should be able to address that. Now, yeah, that takes a level of strength. It takes, you know, getting past your fear to be able to do that. But we're colleagues, we're teammates, you know, that should be why we're working together in a team and not autonomously. If you work for yourself, you're yourself and you are who you are. But if you're working in a workplace, you come into contact with other people, part and parcel of that job is being a teammate, is working alongside your colleagues. And so being able to support your colleagues in times of joy, but also in times of pain, that's what we're all collectively there for. So I would hope if you are my teammate, that you are stepping up for me in the same way that I will step up for you if you have any struggles or I see that you're facing discrimination. Because, you know, like I said, I'm not just Black, I'm also LGBT, I'm also a mother. So I'm going to be standing up for mothers, for other LGBT people, for other Black people. I'm not going to be like, well, I'm only just going to do this part, because then I'm not being true to who I am. So we have to do it for all, until we get to a point where it isn't an issue in the workplace, but we are very far from that. So coming back to that comfortable, when my life is not played out on a global stage, that I am considered less to another human being, then we will all be comfortable. But until we get to that part, let's all just be uncomfortable. We're going to be here for a while, and let's just get on with it.
Thanks, Chloe. Ada, over to you.
Thank you, Chloe. What an answer. So a couple of things came up for me with this question, and also with what you said. So if I go back to the question, I feel my organization isn't doing enough. Well, what does that mean? What are they doing? What aren't they doing? And how do you know that that is enough and that isn't? So what, you know, with all of these things, it's about problem solving. And I think that part of this question in particular is about, if you feel that they're not doing enough, what does good and great look and feel like? And how will you know? What would be the difference if you feel that the organization isn't doing great? What needs to happen? What would that look like if things were different? what would that look like? And what are the steps to get there? Because that is another way of starting to approach the conversation, because people want solutions. And so rather than going in and feeling, if you were to go in and have a conversation and feel that you're being accusatory, change the mindset. Actually, what you're doing is you're going in to try and help solve a problem, to widen diversity, to improve creativity. There are so many statistics out there that talk about how businesses, for example, businesses that have a more diverse board are 30% more profitable. Now, if you can go in with these kind of conversations and these ideas around, well, this is why it needs to happen. I mean, it's a shame that we even have to make a business case for it. It's a shame that we even have to make these kind of decisions. But until we get to the point where we've spoken about before, where we don't even need to have those discussions, these are some of the steps to help you, empower you to, you know, in that word again, but help you to be able to have those conversations. Is, I know that this is what needs to be done, and this is why. And so that is a way of going in and actually thinking about, we need to change the culture. The fact that I recognize as a, you know, if the fact that people are recognizing that not enough is being done says that there's a journey to go on, and change does not happen overnight. And so if you believe and feel that the change needs to happen, then how can you become a change maker? And part of that is going and being an ally and asking questions to be informed, because you may not have the answers of what good and great feels like to a person of color in the workplace who has been marginalized for most of their time in the workplace. Go and ask those questions, go and find out, and be an ally in helping to try and change that. Because I think that is a way of leaning into that discomfort with informed, you know, whilst actually having some insights, having some knowledge about what to do, and support people. What are the processes? What are some of the things that the initiatives, the long-term initiatives? So creating a diversity group is not going to do it, not on its own, because these kind of things, when you created an ethnic diversity group within an organization, is that suiting the organization just by going, well, we've done it now, we're going to pat ourselves on the back and say, we're great, we've created an ethnic diversity group and we've given them a nice room with tea and coffee, and that's great. In order to make change, as Chloe says, these things are all connected. You can't change racism without it impacting capitalism, money, and you can't change any of these other forms of othering without impacting something else. And so that's what you need to recognize, that in order to change this, other things are going to have to change. And in order for organizations to do that, and for you to be a part of that, you have to also think about what are the other knock-on effects and how can this be turned into something great rather than a burden.
Thank you both. I always tend to think about just inclusion generally and well-being as an ecosystem. And I think the issues is when you try to create silos or look at them in silos, because we as individuals are not just one identity or one thing, we're multiple things. And I think that the domino effect really needs to come into play here when you're talking about this. You know, I'm on the fence when it comes to the business case, because we're in 2020, there's lots of research out there that proves the business case, but I sometimes hear you, because sometimes data does the talking, and that is what should be most of the talking for, especially when you're talking about business. But I always agree, I think showing how that correlates to your bottom line and profit and markets that you can actually tap into is really crucial and important. But I also think, like, you know, to try and make change, sometimes, yes, you have to be the person that starts it, but it's also about gathering your tribes, right? Gathering your allies and your supporters. So, you know, if you feel that your organization isn't doing enough and you want to say something to that organization, get the voices around to input on that. Ask people what are their thoughts, so that you can present it in a way that it shows that I'm not the only person that feels that way. You know, and I said this in our last 2 webinars, it's about finding out your allies, but also finding out who your key influencers are that will sponsor and champion you to really amplify your voice, or actually to carry your message into a level where their peers, if it's senior management, for example, can hear. So, you know, and I think, you know, if organizations do have these diversity networks, they should be not just networks to create an initiative to tick box, but they should be networks that help influence and change your business. So where there's policies that need to be changed, where there is things to do with culture in the workplace that needs to be changed, you should be using these groups as sounding boards and input into that. So when you're making your decisions, again, using these different diversity groups to impact that. If you're not doing that, then the question becomes, why are you having them in the first place?
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely ways around it where, again, it takes the burden off you feeling that you have to do this all by yourself. You know, sadly, there are some organizations where it does feel like you're hitting a brick wall and you're all by yourselves. But actually, like Chloe said, we are teammates in this. We spend a lot of our time at work. So, you know, it's finding those teammates to help carry and amplify the change that needs to be had, finding those sponsors that will stand above the parapet for you and say, yeah, actually, I'm taking leadership in this to make that change. But also, again, if it's such a toxic environment, there are such things as whistleblowing, where then things have to be then looked into on a much more kind of, I guess, formal level too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I just add to that? I think that I think that it definitely is a combination of those things, because I know from previous conversations that we've had, and even when I had with Simon in the podcast interview, that we've also got to be mindful about not spending so much time trying to make the business, not most of the time trying to make the business case for diversity. Diversity is a given fact. As I said in the previous session, we would not exist without diversity, and everything else is choice. But we also need to know the audience, who are we speaking to, who are we trying to influence, and what are their measures of success, and how can we bring all of these things. So everything that Amma and Chloe have both said is be an ally, bring together the people, but sometimes we also do need to have those numbers to try and help people make that first step. And whatever it takes to make the first step, that's where we have to start. And that all starts by leaning in and feeling uncomfortable and recognizing that in order to make this change, there are going to be things that are going to have to change from all areas of the organization.
And I think people need to, like you said, Chloe, we're in this for a minute. It's not going to change overnight. And I think people need to be very realistic about that, you know, especially when you're trying to change the status quo. It's not easy. It's never been an easy journey. But, you know, when you get to a place of relief, as I like to call it, you realize that it was worth it. And this is definitely a journey worth taking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, it's for everyone. It's, you know, I always advise if you can do it safely, but, you know, never stay silent if you can see that somebody else is, you know, being discriminated against, because that is a toxic environment, and it may not be you today, but it will definitely be you tomorrow. So that I'm always one for, if you see it, you have to nip it in the bud, because it will come around to you at some point, and then you're all in a toxic environment, versus coming together, finding your allies, finding the other people that you can work alongside together in your business. Or, like everyone said, use your ERGs, use your employment resource groups, because they're already your voices within the organization. And keep it cute, you know, start bringing in anti-racism books, book in a speaker. If you can't say it yourself, but you can advocate for someone else to say it on your behalf and use the right systems, then sometimes that's you speaking out, but you're not actually doing it yourself, you're empowering someone else to. So there are always options. It's sometimes the work is just trying to find out which ones they are and how they apply to you and where you work.
100%. Let's go on to our next question. I work in an all-white office. Do we need to talk about racism at work? Who would like to start with this question?
I will. So, I think we knew this question was coming, so, you know, but it's one that I've been thinking about over the evening. I work in an all-white office. That in itself is part of the problem. And if the person that asked that question doesn't recognize that that is part of the problem, then there's a bigger conversation to be had. Because why is it an all-white office? The fact that, and then you get into, do we need to talk about racism? Well, definitely, if you work in an all-white office, then yes, you definitely should be talking about racism and anti-racism and all the other things, because that is a microculture that is, you know, that is not inclusive, is not one of belonging. There is something inherently wrong with the fact that if you don't see that working in an all-white office and then saying that we do need to talk about racism as an issue.
We often say you cannot be what you do not see. And I see difference when I'm out in the street, I see difference when I'm in a supermarket. So if I'm walking into an office where I just see myself and I don't see any difference, that's not a reflection of society at all. And so if you have a lot of questions that you need to talk about, and racism is just one of them, because we're supposed to be inviting difference, the difference of society. If we are purposefully recruiting similar faces into an office, it will never achieve its end goal. It will never be a productive business. It will never reach its full potential. And also it's harmful. You know, we're not creating spaces that are singular. We're trying to create spaces that are truly diverse and truly intersectional. So, I mean, this is what we should say. This is actually a real question from the last session. That somebody actually asked, hence the faces. And that goes back to that point where I'm saying, if this is all you see, and you don't see anything else, then you need to change your viewpoint. Because it's a very narrow-minded view to what we see, even if you just turn on the television. That's, you know, we don't just see all white, we don't just see all black. You can change the channel, but I can guarantee you across the program of, you know, events and programs, there will be difference. So if we are not talking about all of that difference, all of its forms, especially, you know, if you're in an all-white office, but then how do you celebrate the difference of between gender, between identity? That you can't do half a journey. Either do the whole journey or don't do the journey.
Yeah, so I find this question really interesting because there's just a lot in it. And I think, first of all, I agree with both of you what you're saying. But when we saw this question, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, what do your clients look like and your customers look like? And if you are servicing a diverse customer or client base and you are all white, how are you truly servicing them or fulfilling the end user's needs? How would you know what they need if you're just a bunch of all white people in an office? And it also brought back to the business case piece around, you know, a lot of organizations will become obsolete if they don't truly think about the diversity of their workforce. Because not only will the future talent be selecting organizations because of how their culture is, and also looking to see what resonates within them, and also the prospects of, you know, whatever it's career progression or, you know, multiple markets and global kind of retrospect, you are not going to have a business for very long. So I think for me, that is very worrying. If you are, you know, the early bubbles we should be having right now is our COVID bubbles, as far as I'm concerned. This should not be what we are talking about in 2020. But unfortunately we are, you know, and I think just because you do not have representation to talk about changing things or doing things right, doesn't mean you don't talk about it at all. So my thing around, do we still need to talk about racism? Yes, because when you step out of your workplace anyway, it still impacts in a way. And again, how you, because we talked about microaggressions and the subtleties of prejudice and discrimination, you know, we talk about unconscious bias by default, and that's from your frame of reference. And if your frame of reference is always around people that are very much like you and you don't have much diversity, then it's pretty much that you probably are tuned more so slightly to be more biased against other groups or other diverse groups. And I think the last thing I want to say about this is around checking your circle. Again, if you are checking, if you have, and this is this comes from Diversify from June Sarpong's book, where she does talk about the degrees of separation. And when you look at checking your circle, and if you're in a circle or your work circle looks exactly like you, where is the growth? Where is the understanding? Where is, you know, the acknowledgement and learning that, you know, that we live in a diverse world? You know, and so how do you grow as a person when you are limiting yourself by the people that you you keep with in that sense. So it is very troubling search. And I think for that office, my first thing will be for you to look at why you're hiring white people in the first place, and have that mirror up to your faces and think about, you know what, this needs to change. You know, and there might be a slight touch of privilege there too.
And also,
I mean, I just want to, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
But also, where are you recruiting from? So you are, you know, I think there's a very limitation view of where you're recruiting from, where you're resourcing from. So actually widen the spectrum of, you know, the younger generation are unapologetic about who they are. They are our future leaders. They will do, you know, whereas before you just handed in your CV when you're looking for a job. Like now, young generation, they know your company ID via Companies House. They've gone and done all the research. And if they don't see that your organization is inclusive and truly diverse, they will call that out on social media before they even then say why they're not going to apply for the job. Like they've called you out. We've seen it throughout the summer. We've seen big organizations who've said they support Black Lives Matter, and then their internal workforce has said, I'm sorry, hold on a second, that was a lie, and here are the receipts. So I think that, you know, it will come back to bite you in the backside later on if you do not really take a cold, hard look at what is not around you. And even if you're on the journey of, you know, you can't get the talent in, but you're actually actively recruiting the talent, that's a whole nother conversation. But if it is not even having the steps that talent is being able and allowed to come through and into your business and celebrated when they're there, then that's the first starting place that you need to look at. And your job as an ally is to go and ask that go and ask that question, go and have that conversation inside your business. Because as a Black person, as a person of color, I'm not even there yet, whereas you're already there, you already see it. So you being an active ally to me and someone who looks like me and potentially coming into your business is making sure that when I do come there, I'm safe, because the measures are in place that includes and you know, says that I'm welcome there.
Yeah. Can I just add 2 points to that? So the first is that in a lot of workplaces, the language that's used of inclusion or exclusion tends to be around cultural fit. We hire for cultural fit, and that's that's coding for your face doesn't fit, and it's what is used a lot of time in organizations as we hire for cultural fit. What does that actually mean? Nobody will actually define what that means, but that's another way of creating those microcosms, those kind of this question, that all white office. So if you hear the language in your office of we hire for cultural fit, I would ask you to ask people, what does that actually mean? How do you define that? And and ask them to be transparent about what that actually means, because generally it's a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about, that they hire from a particular university, or there's there's a level of nepotism. So it's the son or daughter or nephew or somebody of somebody else, and it becomes this bubble that we speak about. And the second is to Chloe's point that she was just saying, is that if and Anna mentioned it as well, if as an organization, as a business, you are expecting people of color and Black people to buy your products and services, and yet you don't represent them internally, or you don't treat those people who do work at your organization in a fair, equitable, non-discriminatory, anti-racist way, then everything that you're doing is performative allyship. You are out there trying to sell, trying to brand, come up with a Black Lives Matter statement, but behind closed doors, everything is different. You have an all-white office and you don't look after your people and all of that. All you're doing is performative allyship. And that is something that you really need to check yourself on. That's something that you really need to look at and work out, well, why? Because you're trying to encourage people of color and Black people to buy your products. You're making money off of them, but you don't represent them internally, and you don't look after them internally, and you don't, how are you then trying to market to people if you don't understand the nuances of being a person of color or Black person within your organization? I'm going to leave it there.
100%. And I think that culture fit thing is so key, because as much as you're looking at the recruitment element to bring more diversity in, be very aware of the culture you're bringing them into and what you are creating. And if your culture is toxic or not great, that should not even be part of the recruitment process. Yeah. What you should be looking at is value add. How can an individual add more, better value to our organizations and a different perspective? But if you are all similar, or the majority is similar, then that value add is, you're not even going to see that value add because you have the unconscious bias blinkers on to want to look differently. So I think language is very key, and actually making sure that whatever you throw out in terms of jargon or wording, that you actually understand what that definition and what that really means, and also how that's interpreted by the people you're trying to actually attract into your organization. Do we have another question, or are we going to Q&A? Oh, we have one more question before we go to Q&A. I think probably let's be really as quick as we can, because I've realized that we probably have like, what, 15 minutes left for Q&A, and we always want to try and answer everybody's questions. So this question is about how can we create sustainable safe spaces to discuss issues of race and racism at work? Who would like to start with this?
I guess I'll be quick, because I know Ada I think the first thing we talked about when we talked about this together is what constitutes a safe space.
Yeah.
What constitutes a safe space, and I think it's first establishing that, like, when I go to work, I want there to be an LGBT network, I want there to be a Black network, and I want there to be a women's network, not because I'm not able to speak to HR, but to have that space where I can talk about the issues that affect me as a Black bisexual woman, as a parent, having a space that I can talk alongside my fellow employees, and then invite in higher management to really say, these are some of the issues, how can you help us support them? That for me is a safe space where I am welcomed, I am valued, and then I have the hierarchy to go back and go back and do that in business. So if those spaces don't exist, then it's like going back to the further point, is recognizing what does your business need to do to create a space like that for its employees across the board. It's not just a Black network, like I said, it's many different networks. We're all talking about mental health, there needs to be a well-being one too. And so for me, that's the starting place of making sure that structure is in place to then create the safe space.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chloe.
I would add to that if an organization is using the language of tolerance, that's not a safe space. Tolerance is not creating a safe space. It's, I'm putting up with you because I have to, not because you're welcome or included or anything. And I also would, go out and say that if you are saying that you have a culture of inclusion, but not go further in and say that it's a culture of belonging, then that's still not a safe space. Because inclusion can get to the point of it's just about check boxes. We've got our ethnic diversity group. We do our annual survey. We know the numbers that we have, and so we can put Black faces on our promotional material to say that we've got some people, but they still don't feel that they are included. They don't feel seen. We don't feel seen or heard or included within that space. I know there's a Google report that talks about one of the top 5 things that people need in a work environment is psychological safety. That sense of feeling that I am safe and I don't have to keep making myself small and I don't have to keep holding things in. And I saw that somebody mentioned in one of the questions, PTSD. Most people of color, and I've done global talks and stuff before, most people of color, the first time that they are made aware of the fact that they are Black or that they're the color of their skin is a traumatic experience. And it happened, for most of us, it happened when we were young. And so then you go into spaces where you are still being othered. And this can expand to other forms of othering as well. You go into spaces where you feel that you're othered. There needs to be a level of empathy and understanding of the fact that that is where we're coming from when we go into spaces. And that's how you start to even begin to think about creating a sustainable safe space. Because just creating, as we've spoken about, just creating a group is not enough. Just creating, a once a month you've got a coffee meeting, what have you, is not enough. Doing Caribbean Day in the restaurant, in the cafe, is not enough. These are performative allyship things. And that's at the very slightest, the very least, that is performative allyship. because to create a sustainable space is that, going back to a lot of the things that we've spoken about, you have to look at all of your policies and where you recruit from. And if you're creating creative promotional materials, what faces are you using in that? Is it just to make it look good on the outside, that look, we do have people of color in here, and you know, we're diverse, but actually when it comes to all those other things, you know, how do you do that? When you start to think about holidays, you know, and I'm talking about the national holidays that we celebrate Christmas, you know, in this country, the biggest holiday that we have is Christmas. Well, not everybody, not every person of color celebrates that. You have to recognize that. You have to recognize that there are different belief systems and faith systems and all those other things. And that goes into creating a safe space. The acknowledgement and the empathy of that is what is needed to make people feel safe and secure, that they can bring. Our mental health first aid campaign is My Whole Self. And this is where my whole journey with mental health first aid started, is a conversation. Simon was interviewing me for the podcast about my whole self. And one of the conversations that we had during the podcast and after was the fact that I said that as a white man, it's easier for you to bring your whole self into the work environment than it is for me as a black woman. And that the fact that I can even say that tells me that a lot of workspaces aren't safe, because I'm feeling that, to the point that was made earlier, I feel that, I know that it's not even just a feeling, I know that because of my prior lived experience and this lived experience of other people of color, that I have to hold myself back. I can't bring these other bits of myself into the work environment because I will be penalized, whether it's my hair or whatever you. Those are the things, the nuances that you have to really get into, the empathy. There's a lot of work that goes into the idea of creating a sustainable safe space.
Thank you both. I completely agree. I think when we look at this question, the first thing that comes to mind is people wanting to create little groups where they can talk in, and that's how the safe spaces should be. And I think it needs to be parallel with everything else that you do. So we're going to go to questions now, but just to quickly say, for me, it's 3 words. It's very much about the acknowledgement, the empathy, and the recognition. And what we need to do is, yes, whilst we still need to create the safe spaces for the conversation to continue, both with allies as well as people of color and Black people, we also need to do that in tandem with the employee experience. And I always say this, and I've said it in our last couple of webinars, you have to take the whole holistic approach of the employee experience from start when you attract right through when they exit. Where are those touch points where individuals and I guess groups, teams can have or will potentially be having these conversations or these experiences. And that's what you need to do, is you create the spaces where people can feel comfortable to say what they need to say in confidence, but you create the environment and the culture where you bring that out of the space to make it actually known to everybody else in a different way. So for me, I think it's people should take out their minds creating these little bubbles or these focus groups or whatever for people to have the conversations, that it's not just about that. It goes much, much more wider. And when you look at it from the approach of belonging and inclusion and well-being, your employee or your people experience should have that. And what should then be inputted in is the voices and the experience of your workforce to help create a better culture. We could talk.
Add to just to reference the previous question, but a safe space also means that non-people of color don't feel that if they raise a point that they feel like they're being accused of something. So the safe space is for everybody, not just people of color, that people can see something isn't right, or that they feel that it will be okay to raise their head above the water, to be able to say, this is not right and this needs to change.
Absolutely. And I think also, so when I mentioned sort of allies and white allies before, I definitely meant that in that sense, that, it should also be spaces for them to be able to talk about their fears and the apprehension and how they then actually tackle that. So I think it's spaces for everybody, not just for a specific type. But I also think that it's really impactful for this conversation, just because it's one of the most hardest conversations that we've been trying to have for years. And we're now having it. And my fear is that it just doesn't diminish because people have tried and it's not working. We have to continue having the conversations.
Find another way.
find another way. There's always another way. Alex, I'm going to hand over to you now so we can at least get some questions in before we finish today's webinar.
Thank you so much. There have been loads and loads of questions, so thank you all for sending them in. We are going to struggle to get through them all. We will do our best to follow up with you afterwards if we can't get through them all. And we're also going to try and group a few together because some of them have been regarding the same issues, and cover a kind of broader range of topics as we can so that we get as much value out of it as possible. To pick up on the conversation we've just had, there's a number of people who've asked whether we have any practical tips for organizations looking to create safe spaces and support these issues, but from a very small organization, so say less than 10 people, in particular charities who may not have resource or budget to be able to put behind any of this. So any practical tips for that?
I guess there's a wealth of resource of online. There are books, you know, why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. I've, you know, as someone who's an anti-racism trainer, I would recommend Nova Read. You know, there are so many different people that you can engage with on a small scale or a larger scale. So first and foremost, Google is your friend. And go and do some research and just do some learning, and then from there you'll find the different resources. But like I said, that book, Rennie's book, Rennie Ede-Lodge, and Nova Read, they're two people that I'd recommend to get into their work.
Yeah, I would add to that list, a friend of mine wrote this book, Anti-Racist Ally, Sophie Williams, and it's actually, if you go to her Instagram account, that she created a Instagram post that has just some very clear points that are really helpful. Another thing that I've seen organizations do is create a book club. Mm-hmm. Create a book club, read the book together, go through those exercises together, have those discussions, because you're including everybody in it, because you have to remember that everybody is starting at it from a very different point, based on their own lived experience or their own experiences and understanding. And for some people, this is the first time that they're actually going to be having this conversation. So you want to create the safe spaces we talked about for people to recognize that they may not have the answer straight away. But if you do it together, then going back to something that Amma said is, find your tribe, bring those people together to be able to start, but you have to start somewhere. And yes, there are lots of resources online. There are videos, there are talks. One thing not to do, or one thing I would suggest that you don't start with, is don't make the only person of color in your organization the be-all, the end-all for your inquiries. Because when you ask a person of color to share their experiences, you're also asking them to recreate the trauma of that experience. And that becomes a burden. You're not empowering anybody by doing that. Yes, you may be curious. Yes, you may want to learn, but go and do the work yourself. If they want to share with you, then listen, and don't make it about you. Don't do the, oh yes, but when I went to India, you know, as a white person, when I went to India, because it's not the same thing, because racism is about power. And by asking the person of color, sometimes the only or the few people of color in your organization, to share or to lead a diversity group or to lead a discussion on diversity, you're not empowering them. You're just recreating that whole trauma and that whole, I saw the question, PTSD. So you have to do the work. But there is a balance. Go out, do the work, and educate yourselves, and then you can start to ask better, more informed questions, rather than just tell me because I want to know. That's not going to help.
Because all our experiences are different.
Very. Yeah. And I think, you know, on that point around, if you have people of color, Black people that want to step up and actually support and lead the conversations or whatever it is you're trying to do to become an anti-racist organization, then you think about how you support them at every step of the way. And then, you know, leadership also needs to think about how to become really good leaders and allies in that space. So there's nothing wrong if people of color, Black people want to do it, but it should be the choice of them wanting to do it. But then it should not be, okay, because they want to do it, then suddenly, okay, we're cool, we've got somebody, so that's fine. It's again, how do you support and make sure that person has the best support they need, both in terms of resources, but also in terms of mental health and well-being. And also, how do you then allocate and make sure that even though they're being involved in the project, that your organization stands with them, so that, you know, whatever it is you're trying to do and change in your organization, that you do have allies that are supporting that, and it actually is embedded in your day-to-day. Second thing I wanted to do before we go to our next question is actually, there's a website called raceequitymatters.com, and they are actually going to launch soon how to actually have safe spaces and create safe spaces in your organization. So that's a website for you to have a look at, sign up to. There's a guide coming up, which we've endorsed. So that's another one. Alex, any other next question?
Thank you. Yeah, and as a reminder, we'll be sharing a few free resources for people to go and check out, as well as the one Emma mentioned. They'll all be circulated with you afterwards. There's several people who've asked about microaggressions. Someone asked, could you explain a little bit about what they are? And a couple of people asking, if you were to see one was to happen in your workplace, what as an ally, how are you able to support that, and without feeling like you are doing it on behalf of the person who might be experiencing that microaggression? So I guess a discussion about microaggressions in the workplace.
Ada, would you like to lead this one?
Yeah. I was just thinking about that. I think a great way of actually getting people to understand it is if we give some examples of microaggressions or invalidations that we've been on the receiving end of, if you're okay with that. Absolutely. So a micro invalidation that I've had several times is that I have a pure and applied maths degree, and I get what, you have a degree? First of all, you've got a degree, you've got a maths degree, really? Oh, interesting. There's that subtleness of what, and you grew up where? In Southeast London. There's that subtleness of disbelief that you, as a Black woman, I could have a degree. There's a really big example actually that's been in the news recently, that a Black barrister went to court to support her clients, and 3 times in the same day she was mistaken for being a client, that she was there for somebody else to support her. So there's the belief that she walked in as a Black woman, and that people have felt, well, no, you couldn't be the barrister, you must be on the receiving end. Or I walk into a shop, supermarket, what have you, and instantly there is the security guard following you around. And so I don't know about the rest of you two ladies, but I remember growing up sometimes when I'd walk into a shop, especially an expensive shop, and kind of make sure that everybody can see my hands, because you don't want to be accused of stealing something. And so it's that's a micro invalidation. That is somebody, they're not directly saying something to you, but their behavior around you dictates that they believe that there is something that you could not be. Chloe, what about yourself?
I said it earlier, but you speak so well. And yeah. I don't see colour, or I'll give you, I've been a manager since I was 17. I used to work with Peter Jones in Sloane Square, which is very bougie. It's part of the John Lewis group. And I had a customer, Mrs. Harper, she had a customer complaint. Now, what I look like and what I supposedly sound like are sometimes 2 very different things. And so she said, oh, Chloe, thank you, you've been so helpful. I'm going to come and see you tomorrow, because that's what they used to do there. And she did, and she came straight up to me. Now, I was wearing a name badge that said Chloe, and she said, hi, I'm looking for Chloe. And I was like, hi, Mrs. Harper. And she said, no, Chloe, the manager. And I said, hi, Mrs. Harper, so glad that we could help you, because in her mind, I couldn't be, this person that, this manager that she had visualized in her mind, simply from the way that I spoke, because of the education that I was afforded at the time. And so you constantly get those, I've had where, if I was still traveling on the tube, because it still happens now pre-COVID, the people that will move their bag slightly as I sit down, and I'm like, my bag is actually worth 5 times the amount of your bag. Do you really want to go there? Those moments where you actually, the things that you have to, and I'm laughing, but the things that you have to do to like fortify yourself, because it's actually demoralizing every single time to have someone expect you to be the stereotype that unfortunately the world plays out, that black and brown people are, like in movies, the black person's the first person to die, the black woman is always the, you know, the thief or the cheater. You know, we are not represented in all of our glory and all of our abundance. So unfortunately, we face microaggressions from people who do not see us in the mainstream and believe that we are less. And so believe that we are the help, or believe that, you know, we're not in these high senior positions because they don't see it. And unfortunately, it's exhausting. It's really exhausting to have to counteract that. So, you know, when thinking about what can I do when I see something like that, if you hear someone say to me, Chloe, you speak so well, and not you are fantastic on that panel, then I am hoping that you're the person that said, why'd you say that? She was great. So that actually it's in real time, someone who looks like you saying to somebody else who looks like you, I saw that you did that. I know what you were doing, and actually, are you sure that that was the right thing to do? That's how I want you to check microaggressions, to see it and to call it out, and to recognize that it's not right, and that we can try and all help each other to stop doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I echo everything. I think for me, it's always the how articulate you are, especially when they see my name and they're like, oh, your name, and you know it because they're looking at a name like, oh, you don't look like you were born here. Well, I wasn't born here, so that's fine. That's definite, but I could have been. But the moment when I'm like, oh, I was born in Ghana, it's almost like the articulation is, oh, and you speak English so well, as opposed to what? Okay, yes, there are still some people, you know, Ghanaian people that still have their accent, but what does it matter? And I think for me, there's a very thin line between microaggressions and stereotypes. So again, when you see somebody having a nice bag or driving a nice car with a person of color, oh, okay, well, you know, there must be something dodgy there. How can they afford a car like that? How can you afford a nice house like this? You know, it's little things like that. Oh, your dad does that, really? Oh, you know, if you're in a good position, a good job, and it's like, well, why shouldn't we be able to achieve those things? Okay, society probably is against us most of the time in trying to achieve those things. But again, why is it so hard for you to believe that we actually can achieve those things? So I think for me, it is. I think also if something just doesn't sound right, and you do know, you can sometimes tell when something says something, you just know. And that's when the allyship, I think, kicks in. It's like, okay, well, why do you say that? Actually, I disagree. You shouldn't have said that. That isn't actually, that doesn't come across really, that's not nice. You know, that kind of stuff. You can tell when somebody is leading or saying something that actually doesn't sound right, irrespective of whether there was no malice behind it, because that's how you then correct people, for them to actually understand what they're saying. And I think for me, the allyship piece is around behavior and listening to what's coming out of your mouth as you're saying it. Because fine, it's fine the first time if you were oblivious to it and you didn't understand or didn't mean what you were saying. But if I correct you or someone else corrects you, then you should be thinking about it a bit more in terms of other things.
And I think that, just to add to that, that one of the ones that I get on a regular basis as well is so I was born here, and I get oh, so when did you arrive? Where did you come from? You know, and so it's those kind of questions that really, you know, we know that there's something else in that. We know that it comes from somewhere else, and it's the being able to, I think it goes back to that question, one of the previous questions about I work in an all-white office. If you work in an all-white office, you are highly unlikely to be able to pick up the nuances of these types of things anyhow. And so actually being able to, when you work and you surround yourself with people with from diverse backgrounds, from different heritages, different understanding, you are able to recognize and to be able to have conversations and pick up the nuances of different things and recognize your own biases within that. Because sometimes, you know, I think to what Amma said, we have to listen to ourselves, and we have to really listen to where those thoughts, why did some of those things come out of people's mouths? Where did they come from? And I think in terms of actually tackling microaggressions, the first bit, when I run anti-racism workshops, the first thing I say is that you have to be able to recognize it first to be able to do something about it. Don't let things just wash over you and go, oh, well, that's nothing. But if it felt slightly uncomfortable to you, even just a little bit where you just went, but you're not quite sure why, that gut feeling tells you that there was something wrong. And that's what you act on.
And also that language is involved.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more question, but before we do, I just want to really quickly put a point around, you know, sometimes we're getting worried about the microaggressions and suddenly people like saying things wrong and not wanting to say anything at all. That's not what we're saying. I think it's very much around, yes, you have to be self-aware of what you say and how you act, because that does impact people. But we wouldn't do it in such a way where when you're correcting somebody, you shame them in the correction as well, because ultimately what we don't want is for our white colleagues not to be able to start talking about stuff. But we also don't want our people of color and Black colleagues to not want to say things again. So, you know, we need to find a medium where people do feel comfortable. And I think the comfortableness comes in how you correct people to make sure that they understand, so that the next time that they say something, they're more self-aware. Just wanted to say
that's
that.
What we're talking. But I think that's what we were talking about when we mentioned safe spaces. That creating that space where that can happen, that exchange can happen.
And back to listening. You're hearing the three of us talk about examples that have happened to all of us, and now you have an idea that if you go back to your workplace and you hear it, you know that this is not what should be said, and you have examples of how that can be called out. But I don't want to get shouted out by Alex that last question.
Sorry, Alex, let's have one more last question, and then
Alex has got a question.
Sorry, Alex.
Thank you.
Go for it, Alex.
It's one which I hope will just kind of tie off this conversation, and I'm sorry to everyone that we've not been able to give an answer to. We're working on some more content in the future that we hope will continue to ask some of these questions, because they're all really valid and really important. But one regarding just that process of raising an issue internally, if you were to see a microaggression or examples of what you believe might be racist behavior, should we look to include the person who's been affected in this discussion if we were to raise it to HR, or is this placing additional pressure on the person? So should we include a person who we believe has been subject to this in that initial discussion?
So just to paraphrase, the question is, if somebody reports or says that they've gone through an experience of microaggression, do we include them in the conversation thereafter?
Yeah, or if you were to witness one happen in the workplace.
I think you have to use your best judgment for each individual situation. You know, in my case, if you see it and it's something that you know that you can address there and then I would say try and do that if you can safely. If it's something that you need to go home and think about, but the next day, like Ada said, it's niggling you and you know that actually that wasn't right, check in with the person first that it happened to. You know, say, I saw this, are you okay? Is there anything that I can do? They may give you a solution, and then, you know, take that and run with it. But if they say no, but you know that it is wrong, then say, I witnessed this. I'm not at liberty to tell you who I saw it, but it made me feel really uncomfortable and I felt that it needed to be addressed. There are ways of not including the victim or the person that has faced that discrimination and still continuing to perpetuate trauma on them by raising the situation with that person excluded. So use your best judgment, but like I said, don't stay silent.
I echo that, Chloe. I think that there are definitely situations that will probably tell you how to, and again, it's, for want of a better word, trial and error. I think you definitely need to use your best judgment. And if you don't say anything in the moment, there is nothing stopping you. And I said this the other day, there's nothing stopping you from coming back to address it. Just because the moment has gone does not mean to say that that person still hasn't gone through the experience. So I think if you want to say something and you say after the thought, again, it's thinking about how you approach that situation. But the first thing you should do is check in on that individual. How are you doing? If you did not happen to do it in the moment of that. And I think it's also sense checking in to see how the individual is reacting to that moment, because obviously if there are some individuals that might not say anything, and there are some that are very capable of counteracting or challenging when someone has said something, and in that moment you could still support them but make sure you're empowering them. It's quite difficult when the person is silent. But again, if it's so obvious sometimes where actually it doesn't feel right to you, there's nothing wrong from you speaking up, and you should speak up and say, you know, this is not right. But I think it's also checking in on the person is the first thing you should do. If it is very much around having to report it, it's reporting it, but also letting the individual know, because sometimes the people that go through it and have to experience it feel very alone. And even if after the moment that you've done it and nothing's been said, they're kind of like in limbo. So even just to hear, look, you know what, I didn't say anything, but I actually reported the incident because I've reflected on it, and I just want you to know. And, you know, I'm checking in on you, how you're doing, what you need me to do.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both of those. And I would also add the fact that given we are currently the environment, the physical environment of the workplace is now virtual, these things can happen online as well. So we're all on Zoom calls and, you know, all these different platforms, and the same things happen. But what makes a difference at the moment is that people can hide behind screens. And so the same things that we are saying about doing in the physical workspace is the same things that you do online. Utilize the chat. Send a private message to somebody. If it happens in a work group, you know, what, even actually not just work, but even if it happens in a social call, Zoom group call conversation, send a message to the person that has been on the receiving end to check in, because that may not be, it's for many of us, that would not be the first time that it's happened. We've been on the receiving end of something like that, but you don't know what else has been going on that day for the context of how that could have hit. So checking in is definitely the first thing to do. And then sometimes, you know, yes, you can respond in the chat, you know, you can respond on the online call. And, you know, there's not much more I can add to what both Amma and Chloe said, which is definitely, if you feel that it's uncomfortable, it niggles, report it. And ask the person, do they want, you know, you can give the person options. Ask them, do you want, I feel that this is unfair, I feel that this happened and needs to be reported, I'm going to report it, do you want me to share your name or not? Do you want to be included in this conversation or not? Because it may just be that just on that occasion that person is absolutely exhausted and I just can't take anymore. And that you have to give that person the option and the freedom to make that decision for themselves rather than taking it out of their hands. So checking in is definitely the first place to start.
100%. And it comes back to the point around, again, allyship is about doing it with, not on behalf, and talking and speaking for, not over. So I think always giving the individual the option to decide what they want to do and how they want to take what, you know, your involvement in it is always key. But first, check in. And I know we've gone over time, as we always do.
What a surprise!
And I know that we haven't answered every.
I just wanted to add, like you said, consent is everything, and no one wants to feel like they're alone.
Yeah.
Especially now. So just, you know, reach out in whatever ways that you can, but seek consent first, because if someone tells you no, they don't want you to do it, please then hear them and find another way.
Absolutely. And I just want to apologize. I know we just literally touched the iceberg, as we always do with our conversations. But what I will say is that we are thinking of very creative ways to answer your questions and to share that with you. So please bear with us. We are not going to leave all the unanswered questions unheard. So we will find a way to answer all the questions that have not been able to answer, not just in this webinar, but the previous webinars as well. We just never have enough time, but we hope that you really have found our conversation today really helpful. And, you know, there's definitely some links and resources for us to share, as you can see on this slide, where you can find more information around how to have these conversations in the workplace, how to take care of yourselves, how to support people of color and Black people. You know, so have a look at those websites. I think we're sharing the slides anyway, so you'll be able to have a chance to look at the resources. But I just want to thank you again, Chloe and Ada. It's always a pleasure having these conversations with you. I hope that for those that have listened and stayed till the end, that you have felt validated, heard, in some shape or form. For those that are seeking a little bit of support or understanding, I hope again you've got that from us and the conversations. And we just hope that, you just continue to learn, continue to educate, continue to ask the questions, continue to have the conversations in the workplace, because that's how we will get over the uncomfortableness. That's how we will get over, a lot of things that have obstacles which we can actually break. And, so don't want to keep you any further. Watch this space for more series and more talks. And again, watch this space for us in terms of answering your questions. So have a great day. See you soon, I guess. Thanks, Ada.
See you soon, everyone.
Thanks. And thanks, Alex, and everyone in the background for helping us today, as
thank
always.
you.
And I think we're all on LinkedIn, so reach out if you need to.
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah.
We're all on LinkedIn, we're all on Instagram, we're all on Twitter, and obviously there's the workplace email as well. So you can find us one way or the other. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.